Hello everyone, today we're going to be covering using the stimulus keyboard events. This is a new addition to stimulus. If I come over to the stimulus documentation, you can see that they now have access to an entire set of key mappings. So what we're going to do is we're going to read through the documentation, just like every other YouTuber that makes a programming tutorial and pretends to know what they're talking about. We're then going to implement some of this stuff, including the basic keyboard events we have right here with like an enter key. We'll cover adding multiple keyboard events, like maybe enter and space. We'll cover a custom event, and we'll cover like keyboard modifiers like control and shift. So to get started, we're going to have a empty Rails app. We just have that open over here. I should probably CD into it and actually open up that project specifically so that there's no confusion. And then we want to generate two controllers. One is going to be for our pages. One is going to be for our stimulus. So let's go ahead and let's close this up. Hit F11, Control Plus. We're going to want to do a Rails G controller, pages home, so that we have a home page. And then we're going to want to do a Rails G stimulus. We'll call it demo because it's a demo controller. Simple enough. Run a Rails S, close the terminal, and forget you ever opened it. Next, let's come over to our config and our routes.rb. We're going to change this get to a root, the slash to a hash, that funny little thing I say every video. And then if we come over here and we refresh the page, it takes us to the home page. Cool, pretty basic stuff. We can close the routes, close the config, and forget we ever opened it. Let's now come over to our app, our views, our pages, and our home page. Double click that, come over to JavaScript, come into controllers, come into demo, double click that, and then we can get started. This is going to be the JavaScript we run with our stimulus controller. This is going to be the page where we run it. Now, because these are keyboard events, you don't want to just capture any keyboard input on the entire browser or whatever. You're going to have to set up a container that needs to be focused when the keyboard event is fired. You can think of this like your page needs to be focused to like do inputs in a game, right? Like if you're trying to jump around in a game, you want to make sure that you have the actual window content focused and not that every time you jump while you're up here, or every time you press space, your character's jumping or whatever while you're typing stuff, right? So in that case, we want to make sure that down here, something's focused. How do we do that? Well, we can go ahead and clear this out and just create a basic content tag. Inside of this content tag, we want to do a div, which is going to be the name of our container, an empty string, which is going to be the stuff we put in the div. It's going to be empty. We'll pass in some data. The data will be an empty brace. Inside of this empty brace, we need to do two things. One, we need to tell it which stimulus controller we're connecting to. We called ours demo. We don't need the underscore controller. After that, we can do a comma, and then we can say this has an action. Now, before we had the click events, so if you clicked something, you could then fire a action inside of your stimulus controller demo, and let's say the show action or the clicked action, right? Generally, you don't want to name your actions based on what happened. You want to name them based or on what triggered them. You want to name them based on what will happen. So maybe like print click message, something like that. Grab this print click message, come in here, create another method. This is just going to be the thing that we print. And then it says, hey, you clicked the div, right? Now, the issue is if I come over here and I refresh, maybe we come into the console or into the connect and we do a console.log and say, hello stimulus, right? Save that, refresh. We can see that firing. So now we have to fire this print click message, which is inside of this content tag. But where even is it? Our HTML is 8 pixels tall and our actual div doesn't exist, which means we have no height to this. So we can't click on it. Similarly, we can't use a keyboard event on it because we can't focus it because who knows where it is. So let's try and change that. Let's come in here, and then I'm going to casually paste in a bunch of styling. This is mostly just so that we get something that fills up the whole screen. Top pins it to the top 0th pixel, left is the leftmost pixel, position absolute just says I don't care about everything else's positioning, I want to be in the top left. Width of 100, height of 100, self-explanatory. Background color of 555 is like a dark-ish color. So that just changes the entire window to look like this, right? Now if I Control-Shift-I, open up the console again, come over here, and now if I click on it, you can see I click the div. So logic dictates I could now change this to one of the keyboard events. If we look at the stimulus documentation, like good little reading coders, we can see that the action is going to be a key down, dot, and then the name of the key. So let's try the enter key, right? We'll come in here, we'll say this is the key down event. Well, you want this to fire for the dot enter key. And then we want this to not be the print click message. We want this to be the print keyboard key to the console, right? So we grab this print keyboard key, come in here, change this to a print keyboard key, pass in an event, and then we do a console.log where we say you press the key and then the event.key. We save this, we come in here, refresh. If we hit enter, you'll see that nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Well, there is this thing in a browser called the tab index. You can, of course, look into it. Effectively, it is a tool for accessibility. You can define which order something tabs through. So if I come in here to the stimulus page and I do a tab, you'll see it moves me down the page to specific things that have a tab index. This does help with accessibility. Let's say you can't see, you're trying to navigate a page without sight. Pressing tab might take you to like a hidden little button up top that helps you with your accessibility by enabling like page reading or opening up the hamburger menu or whatever. In this case, we're not here for accessibility. We're here to do whatever we want and get yelled at by like QA later. In that case, what you can do is you can just set this to have a tab index, set the tab index to be 0 with no regard for what that even means. That causes this to be focused. And now if we press enter, it works just fine. Nothing else is being logged though. So maybe we want it to be like if I press any key, it logs it to the console, right? I want to create like a big old key logger. Get rid of the enter and the dot, save the key down, refresh the page. And now you can see it's just recording anything that I press. Pretty cool. Okay, what else could we do? We could create a keyboard modifier. So key down dot control plus A, right? If I hit control A to highlight everything, something should happen. So if I press any other keys, nothing happens. If I hit control A, you can see the key is being logged. Pretty cool. You kind of have to trust me that I'm pressing control A, I guess, but you get the idea. Okay, what about a custom event? What if I want to make this fire every time I press the backslash, but I want the backslash to be called like slashy boy, right? If we come into the stimulus reference, we can see, hopefully, that the key events that they have here, the filters, they have some for some of the keys, including the alphanumeric characters, but the backslash isn't covered. So how do we do that? Well, they tell us right here we have to define a custom schema. How do we do that? Come over to your Explorer, come up to the JavaScript folder, go into the controllers folder, go into the application.js file in there, and then do two things. Well, actually three things, I guess, technically. Hit a comma here, do a default schema. That's going to be the schema that comes with the stimulus stuff. Then do a const custom schema equals an empty object. Inside of that empty object, make it not empty. Let's grab the default schema. Make sure you're prepending it with the 3 dots so that we can have the contents of it. Do a key mappings. And then we say, all right, we got the contents of the default schema. Let's add a key mapping. Let's grab the default schema's key mappings, and then let's prepend something to that set of key mappings. Maybe we want to call it slashy boy. So in here, we do slashy boy, do a colon, do some quotes, and then we enter the backslash. But of course, the backslash is an escape character, so it's escaping this quotation mark. So instead, we have to do a second backslash because this one will escape this one, which stops this one from escaping the quotation marks. A little bit confusing. Unfortunately, that's just the way the backslashes work. Final step, come down to the const application, do a document element, and then pass in the custom schema. Go ahead and save that. Then we can come over to the page right here. And if we refresh, we should, in theory, have this being logged. So now if we press this, it logs out the backslash, and it's logging out the backslash based on the slashy boy key event. And probably don't want to name it that in production. So we have custom events, we've done keyboard modifiers, we have done regular keys. How do we do multiple keys? Maybe we want slashy boy to fire, and we also want, I don't know, like the space key to work, right? For that, we put a space inside of our action, do a key down dot space, make this point to demo, and then say print space key. Save that, come into the demo controller, and then we need to print the space key event. And then we do the same thing we did here, where we say you press the space key, but we don't log the key event because it's going to be an empty string, right? Come in here. We can now do the backslash. We can do the space key. But if I press anything else, which you can hopefully hear, nothing else will fire except for those two keys specifically. And there you go. That is custom events, keyboard modifiers, regular keys, all done with stimulus. Pretty simple to implement, pretty readable inside of your actual HTML. Just make sure you're using a tab index or something so that you can actually focus the element. I'm sure there's cleverer ways to do it. This was just one of the ways I found to make it work real quick for the sake of a demo. But yeah, hopefully this was interesting. Hopefully it was helpful, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.